Chinese economy?
Yeah, one of the authors of the report actually said that it is the most important issue for them. And, the Communist Party has sort of been able to maintain power by providing economic growth and jobs and rising income. And now there are, some estimates that there are tens of millions of people out of work. And a lot of these people, they're migrant workers who live paycheck to paycheck, like they can't afford to be out of work for 3-4 months. And, so far, there hasn't been that kind of widespread unrest, but it's always a fear that, at the forefront of the Communist Party's mind.
Great to have you with us. Beijing Bureau Chief Sharon Chen, thank you so much. And Roger, I was speaking to Ginny Yan of ICBC Standard Bank on TV earlier, and she was sort of disappointed actually at the quite complete abandonment of a growth target for 2020, but also she thought that they could have said more about stimulus to boost consumption, though I suppose the focus on employment is a little bit of an indirect way of doing that. Coming up, we're going to talk about EasyJet, and we're also looking at European equities 25 minutes into the equity market open, having quite a strong down day, second day of declines, US futures lower as well. A broad risk-off tone across markets. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. After keeping their gates shut for weeks amid the coronavirus pandemic, Florida's theme parks are taking steps to reopen. Local officials reportedly have approved Universal Studios' plan to begin welcoming visitors again on June 5th. Capacity will be limited, masks will be required, and children's interactive play areas will be closed. As oil prices rebound, will U.S. producers reopen the taps? With drilling activity at a more than 10-year low as of last week, the market is awaiting weekly figures today from Baker Hughes. A week ago, it said there were fewer than 260 drilling rigs in operation, down from nearly 700 9 weeks earlier. Crude starts today at $33.92 a barrel, up 43 cents yesterday. Wall Street will look to head into the long weekend on a positive note. Stocks closed lower yesterday on rising U.S.-China tensions and weak economic news. The market remains higher for the week. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
With COVID-19, so much is unknown.
Is this the worst you've seen?
But we are committed to getting you every piece of information we can as soon as we can.
Tell us about this first big win you have. What is it, 24 million N95 masks?
Fewer unknowns.
Who's winning here? Where is the pressure right now?
That's our goal.
What worries you the most? The time it's going to take for a vaccine?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
A social distancing tip.
While the CDC urges you to avoid close contact, like hugging or shaking hands, there are other non-physical ways to say hello. Wave, wink, use sign language, salute, smile, give the peace sign, throw up an air high five, do jazz hands. Remember, stay a minimum of 6 feet or 2 arms length away from others, and stay home if you can. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Elite advisory firms rely on.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Pauline. Love may be blind, but it has a new smell.
Pauline, the new fragrance from Euro Millions winner Pauline Hinchcliffe.
Tonight's Euro Millions jackpot is a massive £24 million. That's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play online or on the app. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Whoa, just got a Moonpig reminder that it's your birthday Saturday.
Yeah, I set that up.
Oh, do you know what? I forget one time. Okay, I'm in the app.
Oh, the romantic card section.
I'm full of surprises. Now, what rhymes with babe?
How about just uploading a nice pic? No, wait, I'm not ready.
Hey, I love you from every angle. Now for the gift. hearts. Oh, and flowers.
Heartfelt can happen anywhere with moonpig.com. Download the app now.
Behind the highlight reels, championship rings, and colossal paychecks, there are sports stories that fuel, deepen, and even challenge our love for the game. For true tales of underdogs, anti-heroes, and game-changing innovators, explore a sports documentary on TuneIn, like Sports Wars, telling the origin stories of classic rivalries, Raise Sports, about the concussion crisis that threatens football's future, and Dunkumentaries, a podcast devoted to the beauty and power of the slam dunk. For these and more, search sports documentaries on TuneIn. Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike. Just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB Digital Radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chehich.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Roger, the market seems to be reappraising risk to some extent today, with focus shifting from reopenings to re-escalation of geopolitical tensions, particularly in light of what we heard out of China's NPC on a security law for Hong Kong. So the Stock 600 in Europe down 1.3% right now, 30 minutes into the open. Across regional equity benchmarks, the FTSE 100 is lower by 1.8%. The CAC 40 moves lower as well by 1.3%. The DAX lower by 1.4%. IBEX and FTSE MIB both in the red to the tune of around 1%. We did see some weakness in yesterday's US session, partly driven by concerns around US-China tensions, but also another painful initial jobless claims number. Dow, S&P and NASDAQ futures all lower by at least 0.8% right now. It's broad risk-off sentiment translated to a 4 basis point dip in the 10-year Treasury yield around a 63 handle. The 10-year bund yield down 2 basis points, negative 51. The 10-year gilt yield lower by 2.5 basis points to a 14 handle. Those negative rate bets are ramping up in the UK. That saw the 2-year and 5-year yield hit record lows on the gilt yesterday. In FX, we're seeing a stronger dollar, again a sign of risk off, and also a stronger yen. That is the outperformer in G10. And even though oil is heading for a fourth weekly gain, it's definitely taken a hit, being swept up in the broad risk off tone today. WTI down 6.2%, $31.83 a barrel. Brent at 34.25, down 5%.
Right, let's have a look at some of today's top stories, and we start with that major news out of Asia. China saying it will improve national security in Hong Kong by writing a new law into the city's charter. Bloomberg's Brian Curtis has more on that story.
Premier Li Keqiang said that China would establish a sound legal system and enforcement mechanism. Now, details are unclear, but a national law could mean an end around to the local legislative process, which is stalled. Li also said the government would push ahead with integrating Hong Kong and southern China. Some opposition lawmakers are saying this is the end of Hong Kong as we know it. Earlier, 2 U.S. senators introduced legislation to punish Chinese entities involved in enforcing such laws. It would penalize banks that do business with those entities. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg, Daybreak Europe.
China has abandoned its hard growth target, breaking with decades of tradition. Premier Li Keqiang says the outlook for this year is difficult to predict, given the uncertainty surrounding the coronavirus. Beijing will instead focus on jobs, so it's a renewed focus on maintaining employment and investment. And Li says that China remains committed to implementing its Phase 1 trade deal with the US.
Now here, the UK has posted the largest budget deficit since modern records began. That's as the government unleashed an unprecedented amount of spending to prevent the collapse of the economy. The deficit stood at over £62 million last month, according to the Office for National Statistics. That's equal to the total borrowing in the whole of the previous fiscal year.
And in top corporate news this morning, it's a huge day for budget airline EasyJet. Top shareholder Stelios Hadjiioannou has called for the ouster of the UK airline's leadership in the middle of the coronavirus crisis. His campaign comes to a head at an extraordinary general meeting when investors vote on his motion to remove 4 directors, including Chief Executive Officer Johan Lundgren and Chairman John Barton.
Well, for more on that story, let's bring in Bloomberg Airlines reporter Siddharth Phillip. Siddharth, good morning to you. Now, just take us through what is trying to be achieved at this meeting? What is it that Stelios Hadjiioannou wants to do?
Sure. Good morning. So Stelios really wants to remove the airline's leadership as a plan to get the airline to stop expanding. And at the heart of it all is an order for over 100 Airbus airplanes. And essentially, he says that purchase will be a drain on cash at the airline, with the air transport industry facing years of subdued demand.
How likely is Stelios, good to speak to you, Sid, how likely is Stelios to get his way?
So essentially, it boils down to the shareholders, and essentially, Stelios and his family hold about 34% of EasyJet. And so it really comes down to what the smaller shareholders decide. Some of the largest shareholders, including a bunch of big retail Invesco and 91 and a bunch of others, have come out in support of EasyJet and said that they will vote against the resolution. But really it comes down to the small shareholders and seeing what they vote and how they sort of vote in this vote.
But Sid, one of the issues here, this is a very difficult time, to state the obvious, for all airlines, not least EasyJet itself. Is there a sense that perhaps it isn't a good time to rock the boat?
That is a concern for a lot of people, because especially at a time when the management should really be focused on how to cut costs. Remember EasyJet yesterday announced that they will resume flying from June 15th. So essentially the airline is really focused on trying to bring back its full attention to flying again and trying to fill up its planes while maintaining social distancing and other measures. So this is quite a big distraction, as Johan has mentioned earlier. And essentially, it all depends on what Stelios really gets on board.
Yeah, the fact that it is happening in the midst of the coronavirus crisis could help focus minds, Sid. But what would be better for EasyJet stock here? Would it be that Stelios wins the vote? Yes, EasyJet's plunged into turmoil, but at least we have some clarity. Or is it better that the motion fails, but then he keeps sort of continuing to give management a hard time?
Essentially, the jury's out on that. And even if Stelios is to win, EasyJet would have to pay significant penalties to Airbus to cancel the order. And it's not really as simple as cancelling an order and walking away, but there would be severe penalties as well as possible lawsuits that drag on for years. And that could be an order, and also he needs to get the board support for subsequent cancellation of that order, because this is just a vote to remove the directors and not really to cancel that Airbus order.
It'll be a fascinating moment, certainly, in the company's history. We'll see how it all works out. Siddharth Phillip, thanks very much, Bloomberg's airlines reporter there.
Yeah, and EasyJet shares right now down 3.9%. Let's get the world news now with Sandra Kilhoff. And Sandra, you begin with the UK plans to quarantine international travellers.
Yes, good morning, Naira. People coming to the UK could be fined £1,000 if they don't self-isolate for 2 weeks when they arrive. Under the plans, health officials will carry out spot checks at private addresses to ensure travellers are complying. That said, road hauliers and medical officials would be exempt, as well as those arriving from the Republic of Ireland. The new rules are not expected to come into force until next month. Turning to Italy, where new coronavirus cases are continuing to decline, Bloomberg's Flavia Rotondi says infections fell to 642 cases on Thursday.
The number of daily fatalities was substantially unchanged at 161. The government is now monitoring the pandemic trends at regional level and may further relax containment measures with free movement within the country from June the 3rd. In Rome, Flavia Rotondi, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Russia has warned that the US withdrawal from Open Skies will impact all members of the pact. President Donald Trump says Russian violations make it untenable for the US to stay in the treaty. Open Skies allows nations to conduct observation flights over each other's territory and was first touted by President Eisenhower in 1955.
In these times of vast military machines and nuclear-tipped missiles, the ferreting out of this information is indispensable to free world security.
And Vladimir Putin is again moving to extend his presidential term to 2036. Bloomberg's Henry Mayer reports.
Putin may announce a snap ballot within weeks on proposed changes to the constitution that allow him to sidestep term limits, according to people familiar with Kremlin discussions on the matter. Electronic voting will be used, as well as polling stations, to boost turnout and the yes vote. In Moscow, Henry Mayer, Bloomberg Daybreak, Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kilhoff. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Sandra, thanks. Nice to hear Eisenhower there. Now, with the morning sport, there's William Esler starting with health issues in football.
Liverpool captain Jordan Henderson insists he has no safety concerns over return to football. Premier League clubs have returned to training in small groups this week, adhering to social distancing rules. But some players have refused to train due to coronavirus fears. Manchester United boss Ole Gunnar Solskjaer believes he has cleared out any bad apples amongst the squad at the club. The Norwegian added there was no place for self-obsessed players at Old Trafford. Speaking to the United We Stand fanzine, Solskjaer revealed there were personal agendas at the club when he took over that he resolved last summer. The EFL board have put forward a draft framework that would see promotion and relegation remain even if the seasons are not completed. It means Stevenage are now likely to be relegated, despite the League Two season being curtailed last week. Final tables would be set on an unweighted points per game basis, and promotion playoffs of no more than 4 teams are also to be played.
That's your European sport. Coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Rupert Harrison, portfolio manager for BlackRock Multi-Asset Strategies, joins us on the show as we look at a risk-off day across assets, geopolitical risk front and centre again. 40 minutes into the equity market open, the Stock 600 down 1.5%. So coming off the lows, US futures also point to a lower open. This is Bloomberg.
If you love them enough to listen to them practice the same song on tuba, please be done. Over and over and over and over and over, then surely you'll check NHTSA.gov/the right seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat.
Sounds good, honey.
Check today at NHTSA.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Take the Bond Challenge. Use the free Interactive Brokers Bond Scanner to search their deep availability of U.S. government securities, 38,000 global corporate bonds, and 850,000 municipals. IBKR passes through the highest of all bids and lowest of all offers received at the electronic venues it accesses. We do not widen spreads, apply hidden fees, or mark up quotes. How many basis points does your current broker keep? Find out at ibkr.com/bonds.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Have you wanted to speak a new language?
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work.
The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working-safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunnin to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone,
Come explore TuneIn's Classic Game Replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There's going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night, and there's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, plays to the 5, touchdown!
Search Classic Game Replays to listen for free.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn. Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
Kill O'Neal. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk all the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with a podcast on TuneIn. For expert analysis straight from the WWE to Steve Austin's no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning, I'm Roger Hearing with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. And the concern that we saw expressed in Asian markets over that latest view from Beijing about how they will deal with Hong Kong definitely translated into concern here in Europe. Stock 600 down 1.2%, FTSE 100 down 1.5%, the CAC down just over 1%, the DAX down 1.13%, and the IBEX down 0.7%, and the FTSE MIB the same. And looking to the US opening, again also very much in the red, although not as much as we had seen earlier in the European session. S&P 500 down 0.7%, NASDAQ down 0.9%. Keeping an eye also on the bond market this morning, US 10-year Treasury benchmark at 63 basis points. That's down 3 basis points. We're also keeping keeping an eye on gilts, of course, and there we're seeing it's at 14 basis points. That's down 2 basis points at the moment. Also keeping an eye on the dollar. Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, the dollar is stronger by 0.4%, reflected perhaps on cable where the pound is weaker by 0.4% at 1.217. Oil also taking a hit. Brent now down by 6.63%, $31.67 the barrel. Brent is at 5.52% down. That's at $34.07 the barrel. It's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Sandra Killoff with more on what's going on around the world. Sandra.
Good morning, Roger. We begin in the new pandemic epicenter, Brazil, which has reported a daily record of 1,188 deaths from the coronavirus. Almost 2/3 of all Brazilian cities have now been hit by the virus. Just 7.3% of Stockholm's inhabitants had developed COVID-19 antibodies by the end of April, according to the Public Health Agency. It raises concerns that the country's light touch approach to the coronavirus may not be helping it build up broad immunity. Sweden's Public Health Agency has previously said that it expected about 25% to be infected by May 1st. And while Britons are clapping for carers each Thursday to applaud their efforts, the appreciation seems to stop there. Average pay for new positions in the social care sector has risen by just 20 pence to £9.50 per hour since before the UK's coronavirus outbreak. That's according to recruitment website Indeed. The analysis shows around 40% of care posts nationwide pay below the real living wage. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kilhoff. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Sandra, thank you so much. Now let's get to our guest for the hour. And joining us down the line, Rupert Harrison, Portfolio Manager for BlackRock Multi-Asset Strategies. Rupert, really great to have you on the show with us. Thank you so much. We wake up this Friday to a risk-off tone across markets. It was present yesterday as well on concern around US-China tensions, more poor US data in initial jobless claims. And then today, we layer on to that what we heard from the NPC about the potential for a new security law in Hong Kong, and there's a new perhaps re-escalation risk in the markets in terms of geopolitical risk. Is this something that you think investors might start to price in more aggressively over the coming weeks?
Yes, absolutely. I think it is. I mean, it's obviously difficult to price this sort of escalation in geopolitical risk at the same time as the extraordinary kind of macroeconomic and social consequences of the COVID crisis. But I do think that markets have been underappreciating the likely scope and extent of where US-China tensions are likely to lead over the years ahead. I think this is something that is going to be with us for a long time, and the escalation we've seen today is just one example of that. And I think that, clearly this Hong Kong action is going to lead to further action by the US. You've got very, very strong pressure across the political spectrum in the US to take tougher action against China. We had the White House strategic approach to China was published yesterday, sets out really a kind of full spectrum approach to tackling a kind of competitive relationship with China. And I think that therefore markets are still not pricing the full extent of this. If we look at Asian FX, Asian credits, if we look at things like Chinese ADRs, Taiwan and some of the tech exposures, I think that this is something that markets are still trying to get their heads around.
And I guess also, Rupert, I mean, perhaps what that's blinded us to in a way is some of the other things that have been said out there, not least in the way of dealing with the virus outbreak in China and the effect that will have on markets, not least, of course, this concern about unemployment, trying to build up jobs in China, because demand is still a big problem in that economy, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and I think that's the other news coming out of the NPC meeting in China that's slightly been overshadowed by the Hong Kong news, is that actually on balance the kind of economic response that's been set out is probably disappointing relative to what markets were hoping for. So, talking about special bond issuance in the region of 1 trillion is probably smaller than expected. The increase in the fiscal deficit, again, 3.6%, only up marginally. And the language around credit expansion, yes, more credit than last year. But I think, again, on balance, Chinese policymakers are probably more constrained in what they are able and willing to do to support their economy than markets had hoped. So, again, another negative, I think, there.
That's interesting, Rupert, that you think China perhaps more constrained in supporting the economy that markets had hoped, because previous to this MPC, there were a lot of things being written around how to invest around the stimulus globally. If you look at that just in China, what strategies would you be taking around investing on China based on the prospect for stimulus there? Some have pointed to a preference for high yield, for example.
Yeah, so I think we'll be a lot more cautious. I think that the market is perhaps looking for a repeat of the sort of 2015-16 playbook around kind of very large credit-driven stimulus in China, impact on the domestic economy, but also globally on cyclicals, materials. I think that people need to understand that even in the face of this very, very difficult economic crisis, the Chinese policymakers are still constrained by concerns around leverage. They are still constrained by not allowing concerns to develop around the currency, and I think that therefore they are trying to take a more balanced and a targeted approach to their economy. You're not going to get the kind of full spectrum stimulus that I think some investors were hoping for.
Rupert, let me move you on to a more general subject of the global economy, I suppose, and the question we have to ask everyone this week and going on for weeks ahead, I'm sure. What about the shape and duration of any recovery? We've talked about China a bit, but more in global terms, do you have a better picture now of where we are in all this?
Well, I think, again, it's going to be gradual, and I suspect, sorry to be sounding a bit gloomy this morning, but I think more gradual than markets are hoping. It was interesting, we saw flash PMIs yesterday, and yes, reassuring that those numbers are creeping up, but they're still in very deeply contractionary territory for the second month in a row. I think that speaks to a very, very gradual recovery. And certainly if you look at developed economies, I think we've seen a very gradual loosening of restrictions on activity. That is happening very, very slowly, and I think the big uncertainty is how much activity can we get back before the spread of the virus starts to creep up to levels that policymakers are yet again concerned about. And I think that trade-off is going to prove more difficult than people hope.
How gloomy then, Rupert, are you on the UK? The market looks to be pricing in at least a 10 basis point cut by February 2021. We saw 2-year and 5-year yields on gilts hit record lows yesterday. Are negative rates coming for the UK, and are you positioning for those in the portfolio?
I think the UK is subject to a lot of the same problems as the rest of the developed economies, but it also has this kind of Brexit uncertainty hanging over it. I'd say we're modestly negative on sterling in particular as a result of that. I think that negative rates is something that the Bank of England want to keep open. I think if you listen to Andrew Bailey, we had Dave Ramsden yesterday as well, talking about negative rates, I think they are sort of paying lip service to the idea that in theory nothing is ruled out. I think they want to keep the option open. I think they like the fact that markets are pricing some probability of negative rates. They like the way that is feeding through into UK financial conditions. In practice, personally, I think it's still unlikely. I think there are aspects of the UK financial system that make negative rates difficult. I think it'll be difficult for banks and building societies in the UK. And I still think it's not the Bank of England's preferred policy answer. So on balance, if I had to bet, I suspect that we are not going to see negative rates in the UK.
Rupert, I just wanted to ask you about commodities and all this, because it's fascinating in terms of a portfolio. Oil has been falling this morning, but snapping its 6-day winning streak. Gold, 35% surge over the past year, making it the best performing major asset. I mean, what is your view in that sector?
Well, gold is the area where I think we would have strongest conviction. We do like owning gold in portfolios. In a multi-asset portfolio at the moment, you have to, I think, be realistic about how much cushion you're going to get from government bonds in this environment. With yields already so low around the world, I think that government bond yields are going to be less volatile and less responsive to the downside. So therefore, we need to look for other diversifying assets in a multi-asset portfolio. And in this environment, we do like gold. I think the combination of concerns around, global money printing and therefore sort of longer-term inflationary concerns, similar to what we saw in the sort of coming out of the financial crisis back in sort of 2009. So a combination of sort of safe haven flows, the sort of global money printing dynamics make gold an attractive hedge to own in portfolios.
Rupert Harrison, Portfolio Manager for BlackRock Multi-Asset Strategies. Thank you so much for joining us. We've run out of time, Roger, to ask whether he finds emerging markets attractive, because analysts have raised earnings estimates for the first time in 18 weeks. A little bit of FOMO perhaps in play in those markets. In terms of European equity markets, more fear than anything today. We're seeing a second day of declines for the Stock 600 and US futures lower as well. This is Bloomberg.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Pauline. Love may be blind, but it has a new smell.
Pauline, the new fragrance from Euro Millions winner Pauline Hinchcliffe.
Tonight's Euro Millions jackpot is a massive £24 million. That's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play online or on the app. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
We're all in uncharted territory looking for ways to support our communities. At Dell Technologies, we're making sure small businesses have the right tech solutions. Dell Technologies advisors are here for you, helping small businesses stay connected and productive while working remotely with Windows 10 Pro and Microsoft Teams. We're standing by you every step of the way. Call us today on 0800 169 1745. That's 0800 169 1745.
Did you know that with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations broadcasting in your area? Discover local news, talk, and music stations. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
Today at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
The idea is to really hold the economy in suspended animation until we get control of this virus.
We are very much in a picture of monetary dominance.
We will get slower growth. I mean, let's not get confused about that.
We are in a national crisis. I think it is for all parties to pull together.
The euro area is facing an economic contraction of a magnitude and speed that are unprecedented in peacetime.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
A very good morning from London. I'm Caroline Hepke.
And Guten Morgen from Berlin. I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to London DAB Digital Radio.
So, Matt, the UK budget deficit here has hit a record high, but frankly, who cares if borrowing costs are so low and the economy is floundering? We also had UK retail sales out this morning. Yeah, that collapsed last month. And then this from one of our interviews this morning with the Lord Mayor of London, William Russell. He says that he doesn't see city firms bringing back workers into the square mile until basically January next year.
Yeah, we're hearing from so many bank CEOs that they don't even think half of their workers will be back until 2021. And we're hearing from a lot of big other firms, you know, Facebook, for example, saying it's going to start remotely hiring. You can work from anywhere in the world. You could get a place in the BVI's and work for a major corporation that's based in San Fran, New York, London, Hong Kong.
You're making me
awesome.
dream. Yeah, it's Bank Holiday Monday on Monday here. So, yeah, I'm going into my long weekend with that lovely image in mind. The thing, though, that is not quite so lovely as the markets right now. We're down 1.5% on the US stocks 600. This, of course, also because of this sweeping national security legislation that China is looking to impose on Hong Kong. And that's led to the real risk off. We saw Hong Kong shares drop significantly, the Hang Seng down by 5.5%, and the risk off tone is also here in Europe. So the Xetra DAX down by 1.4% this morning. As for US futures, they drop almost a full percentage point for S&P 500 E-mini futures. And in the bond markets, Matt, we're at negative 51 basis points for German yields, 1.5 basis points lower. UK gilt yields at 14 basis points on the 10-year, 63 basis points for US yields. And then having thought that we were stabilizing in the oil markets, actually we drop again this morning. WTI crude futures $31.56, so down almost 7%. Brent crude dropping 5.7% this morning. Those are the markets.
Still holding above 30, right, on WTI. I think that's a level that that a lot of people are watching. But yeah, it's a very risk-off day today, even if we're going into, or maybe because we're going into a long weekend. But you hit probably the biggest story for markets right now. That is China's national security law for Hong Kong, really fueling concerns about fresh protests there. I think the world is watching that, as well as the increased U.S.-China tensions. Let's bring in Louise Dudley to talk about this. She's a global equities portfolio manager at International at Federated Hermes. So, Louise, what do you think about the China situation? I mean, this rule has been in their constitution that they need to create this law for forever, well, for decades in their little mini constitution. But it's always caused incredible controversy when it's brought up.
Yes, and the fact that the lows that were the moves that we've seen today, really not seen since 2008 or so. So really quite a shock to market, and certainly the repercussions of that. But looking back to kind of the strikes that we had towards the start of the year, they have been going on for a while, and if it leads to kind of a lot more kind of political unrest within Hong Kong that we do see striking, what we saw last time is that people had got to a kind of almost strike fatigue, that people wanted it to be resolved. So whether this time there'll be kind of quicker moves from governments on both sides to really try and escalate it, but then also kind of contain it as well.
Yeah, but look, we've known for some months, have we not, that Hong Kong is no longer really a kind of hands-off territory, that its financial centre, financial hub credentials are increasingly in doubt. So does this actually make any difference to you when you think about investing?
So I think the main thing is whether or how Trump responds to this. He brought in the rules last year. It's now in place. Could that be strengthened? I think that's, the extent to which he kind of really looks to exert his power on Hong Kong, and whether he can get through anything else through Congress in terms of strengthening that will be interesting. But one thing that we also saw last time is that companies came forward kind of either on one side or the other, making supportive comments. So whether that will happen again is interesting, and whether those companies are being pushed internally to make those comments. So that will be interesting, and that may then escalate with the US if they then have US relations as well, that it may be problematic for them. So that's something that we're watching quite closely.
Are all bets off in terms of the Phase 1 trade deal? Do you feel like that's probably not going to happen now?
I think Trump has it definitely as a key target to achieve. So that will be very much on his mind, I'm sure. And, November isn't that long away. And at the moment, most recently, his ratings haven't been as strong. So whether it kind of people thinking it's over, then bringing it back, then the more positive sentiment is something that's out there.
Your focus is, and you lead, in fact, ESG and responsible investing at Federated Hermes. So I'm curious as to your view, do you understand, how does one understand Chinese equities from an ESG perspective? Does that feature at all?
Yeah, so it's more of a challenge because of the structures that are there. However, Chinese companies more recently have been more open to speaking to investors. They recognise that is part of being a more, part of a more developed type investor system. They need those global investors, those institutional investors, which do have higher standards in terms of disclosure and in terms of transparency on kind of forward-looking strategy. So I think companies have been responding to that, and we've seen also within Hong Kong some regulations coming in to encourage that type of behaviour, and mostly that's been very well received by the market.
What do you think about the possibility of a recovery here in Europe? I mean, we're seeing pretty decent numbers out of Chinese sort of back to business stories. What about Europe? Are we going to get back anytime soon? Are you optimistic that we'll do well when we do?
So I think for Europe, we're expecting a more kind of slower rebound. Certainly tech generally is a smaller weight than we see within the US, but it has been gaining share. Obviously, there is significant healthcare exposure as well, but it's really the financials that historically have dominated and have been a significant part of the index, which we expect to lag, and that will bring down the whole overall market.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Really good to speak to you. Louise Dudley, Global Equities Portfolio Manager at International Federated Hermes. Thanks for coming on the programme.
And I am very excited to get over to Sandra Kilhoff on World News. Sandra?
Good morning, Matt. I begin with the news about the pact between Russia and the US and 35 other countries' open skies, because Russia has warned that the US withdrawal will impact all 25 members of the treaty, but President Donald Trump says Moscow has violated the pact that allows for unarmed surveillance flights.
There's a very good chance we'll make a new agreement or do something to put that agreement back together. But whenever there's an agreement that another party doesn't agree to, we have many of those agreements around the world. When we have things like that, we pull out also.
In Brazil, confirmed coronavirus cases have now topped 300,000, but Bloomberg's Shannon Sims says there is a spot of good news for Latin America's biggest economy.
A rare compromise was reached with the Bolsonaro government, and assets rallied after Bolsonaro and his governors reached a deal to freeze public workers' salaries. That eased concerns from banks about fiscal deterioration and an ensuing political crisis. Shannon Sims, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Meanwhile, the UK government has agreed to buy 10 million coronavirus antibody tests from pharmaceutical companies Roche and Abbott. Health Secretary Matt Hancock says the tests will be crucial to better understanding the spread of the disease.
Knowing that you have these antibodies will help us to understand more in the future if you are at lower risk of catching coronavirus, of dying from coronavirus, and of transmitting coronavirus.
The tests will be rolled out in phases starting next week and offered to health and social care staff first. And the World Bank is giving East African countries $500 million to fight the worst locust plague in decades. Bloomberg's Paul Richardson reports.
The funds are being given to countries including Ethiopia, Kenya and Uganda to offset the impact of the insect invasion. More than 22.5 million people are facing hunger in Eastern Africa. Failure to combat the pests could result in the loss of livestock worth $8.5 billion by the end of the year. The bank estimates the intervention could limit the damage to $2.5 billion. In Johannesburg, Paul Richardson, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kilhoff. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sandra. Buried in there was the big story in the UK, which is that actually we might get these coronavirus antibody tests, which apparently are going to start to be rolled out next week. Exact questions about whether they work, who gets them, and whether, 10 million sounds like a lot, but it's probably not. There's 65 million people of us here.
There was a great story on the Bloomberg that was talking about how there's a very positive outlook in terms of your immunity if you really have had the coronavirus, right? Did you see that? But also saying that these antibody tests are so bad that if you get a pass that you've had it already, it's only 54% chances that you have. So.
Yeah, 50-50.
Fairly useless.
Yeah, not good odds, I think, if you really are concerned and you've got underlying, health issues. But there's basically so little that we know about the virus even now. But anyway, should we get a bit of sports news in the meantime? William Essler's got all the latest.
Is there sports news?
There is a bit of sports news because there are health issues in football. Come on, someone out there wants to hear about the sports. Here's William Essler.
Liverpool captain Jordan Henderson says he has no safety concerns over a return to football. Premier League clubs have returned to training in small groups this week, adhering to social distancing rules. But some players have refused to train due to coronavirus fears. Manchester United boss Ole Gunnar Solskjaer believes he has cleared out any bad apples amongst the squad at the club. The Norwegian added there was no place for self-obsessed players at Old Trafford. Speaking to the United We Stand fanzine, Solskjaer revealed there were personal agendas at the club when he took over that he resolved last summer. The EFL board had put forward a draft framework that would see promotion and relegation remain even if the seasons are not completed. It means Stevenage are now likely to be relegated to the National League, despite the League 2 season being curtailed last week. Final tables would be set on an unweighted points per game basis, and promotion playoffs of no more than 4 teams are also to be played.
All right, so there was, it's kind of your sports report. It's about sports.
Yeah.
But there aren't really any sports on right now, except the Bundesliga, right?
Yes.
We do have Bundesliga going on here, which is pretty awesome. Here's what we're watching today at 10 a.m. London time. EasyJet kicks off its EGM. Shareholders will vote on whether to remove the company's chairman, CEO, and CFO as directors. And at 12:30 p.m. UK time, the ECB releases the accounts of its latest monetary policy meeting, so watch out for that. And finally, Alibaba is set to publish its earnings before the U.S. market open. The Chinese e-commerce giant is likely to report a year-over-year profit decline in the March quarter.
And still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we're going to talk about the vaccine and what's happening with AstraZeneca. This is Bloomberg.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Are you looking for senior care for your mom or dad but don't know where to start? Hi, I'm Joan London with A Place for Mom. Nobody knows your parent or loved one better than you, and nobody knows senior living better than the experts at A Place for Mom. It's a free service, and we've helped thousands of families find the right place for their mom or dad. There's a place for answers, A Place for Mom. Call today.
Call A Place for Mom at 1-800-391-1755. That's 1-800-391-1755.
To protect her home and family in a disaster, Karen was willing to wade through water, mud, and insurance paperwork.
Yeah, I can do this.
You go, Karen! By simply understanding and updating what her insurance covers and doesn't cover now, she'll be better prepared no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Briggs.
We're joined by Michael Levine of Pivotal Research. Give me some of your initial thoughts about Facebook's shops and really some of the opportunities that it could unlock for the company.
Look, I think it's pretty fascinating. I mean, one of our messages to clients, just even looking as earnings season's gone by, is it's been pretty apparent that if you basically have a store, if you've underinvested in your presence online, like you need to get there and you need to get it figured out in a hurry. And I allowed Facebook for doing something I think a little bit different than what they've done before in their prior attempts, because stores is not necessarily a new thing to them. Marketplace is not a new thing. I don't really think it's seen a ton of traction. I think investors have been sort of waiting on this for about a year and change, and I think they realize the same thing. Like, this is the time to get behind it, and I think they've also done a very good job trying to help support the small, medium business community. So what to me is very different is the much more open ecosystem that they're embracing. So working with companies like Shopify and BigCommerce that are very frequently used solutions for small businesses. So they're just making it a lot easier to basically take the on-ramps.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Plunge.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York City. I'm Amber Hodern with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. It's a risk-off Friday this morning. We started to see it in Asia, and then it's ripping really throughout the equity markets around the world. The Hang Seng plunged more than 5% today. In Europe, we are seeing the Stock 600, the benchmark index, down 1.3%. FTSE, DAX, and CAC all down more than 1% as well this morning. Really red arrows across the board. And then S&P and Dow futures are down 0.8%, pointing to a lower start in New York. This comes as investors are really bracing for more toxic rhetoric between Beijing and Washington, and fresh turmoil in Hong Kong with protests as China announces plans to impose a national security law on Hong Kong. On top of that, China has abandoned its practice of setting a GDP target. Now, this was expected, but what it really does is emit this North Star for investors to start to predict a number of economic indicators when looking at Beijing. In this risk-off day, we are seeing oil under pressure. WTI crude down 6.7%, just under $32 a barrel. Brent crude down nearly 6% as well, $34 a barrel. We see money moving into the safe havens like the Bloomberg Dollar Index and the Japanese yen, all higher this morning, as well as Treasuries yields down 2.8 basis points, spot 6.5% on that Treasury yield. So really a risk-off Friday today. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Sandra Kiloff, I believe, with this morning's news. Good morning, Sandra.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Vladimir Putin is moving to regain the political initiative for his plan to remain as Russia's president until 2036. Bloomberg sources say Putin may announce a snap ballot within weeks on proposed changes to the constitution that would allow him to sidestep term limits. 2 doctors are preparing to sue the UK government over its guidance to frontline NHS staff and social care workers on personal protective equipment. Law firm Bindmans says government advice to reuse some protective clothing goes against guidance from the World Health Organization and is a breach of health and social care workers' human rights. And Indonesia has reported its highest number of daily coronavirus cases. Officials said the virus has been spreading at its fastest rate over the past 9 days, due in part to a worsening outbreak in East Java. It comes as millions of Indonesians prepare to mark the Eid festival without the usual celebrations and gatherings. A travel ban is also in place for the holiday, though thousands have reportedly already gone home to their families anyway. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kilhoff. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 9:20 in the city. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined by opinion columnist Chris Hughes today, who's writing about how AstraZeneca could get caught up in vaccine politics. Chris, talk to us about, AstraZeneca's announcement yesterday. 400 million doses they say they could make by September, but they're not really a vaccine producer, right? They're just kind of they're very good at running large-scale tests and production and distribution.
That's right. So AstraZeneca, one of the UK's 2 giant pharmaceutical companies, yesterday revealed that its collaboration with Oxford University on a potential vaccine against the coronavirus, that project is really stepping up. So it started out as quite a UK-focused affair, albeit with global ambitions, let's be clear. But it was a collaboration between AstraZeneca and Oxford to get this vaccine done pretty quickly, actually, by September. And that suddenly got the involvement of the US. And so what was being talked about initially as possibly 100 million doses is now, as you say, ramping up to 400 million. That 300 million extra is really going to the US. And it's become a lot more ambitious in terms of size. $1 billion potentially of funding from the US to fund late-stage trials. And as you say, all of this being overseen by a company which is really a cancer specialist mainly. It has many therapeutic areas, but it's not actually a vaccine company. And it's stressing that it wouldn't actually seek to profit from this during the pandemic. So for AstraZeneca, it looks like something which is partly about sort of just lending the resources it can provide to fighting the crisis for quite an uncertain financial outcome.
Okay. Well, perhaps, that could obviously be seen in a very good light given the crisis that we're in. But then AstraZeneca's almost putting themselves into a very difficult political situation. What happens to the idea that Britain's first in the queue? That's very much what the background of the Oxford University, vaccine push.
That's right. So when this seemed to be a mainly UK project, I guess that wasn't much of a debate. Now, clearly, there's a big question mark over kind of, I guess, the nationality of this project now, given the large sums of US money coming in.
Yeah, Chris, I remember Chris reading when it was just a UK project, Britain had funded it with £62 million. So now the US coming in with $1 billion kind of stakes a claim, doesn't it?
Well, I suppose that partly reflects clearly the differing sizes in orders. So for AstraZeneca to actually take the risk on kind of pre-producing the vaccine even before it's clear that it's going to be successful, it really needs kind of committed orders. So it's part of the function of the huge size of the US population.
Do you think it says anything about the reliability, though, or the possibility, the betting that this vaccine is going to work as opposed to all of the other dozens that are being tested?
I'm going to be very careful because I'm not a scientist, and it does look as though this is about recognizing the urgency of the crisis and making sure that no one knows right now which, if any, of the many vaccine projects underway are going to prevail. I mean, let's hope that at least one of them does. At the moment, this is a case of backing multiple and being in a state of readiness so that if one of them does succeed, it can be administered quickly.
And it's a very hot debate, and there's that whole issue of vaccine nationalism that you write about for the Opinion team, which is fantastic. I recommend our listeners check it out. Type OPIN GO to get Chris's column. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. The XFL's proposed sale procedures and post-bankruptcy loan unfairly benefit owner Vince McMahon. That's according to creditors of the bankrupt Alternative Professional Football League. The Committee of Unsecured Creditors said in an objection filed in the U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the District of Delaware, the XFL has done little more than act as a shill for McMahon, who holds a majority stake in the short-lived sports league. The proposed asset sale would be free and clear of all liens and claims. The creditors said should McMahon be the ultimate purchaser, he would be insulated from complaints related to his conduct running and terminating the XFL. Manchester United's revenue dropped in the third quarter as the club estimated it will have to pay a £15 million or $18.4 million rebate to broadcasters after the coronavirus pandemic put a halt to soccer. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
What happens next? When a downturn looms, shareholders turn to the C-suite to maintain profitability. And for 2 decades, the leaders of Fortune 500 and Global 2000 companies have turned to GEP for results. GEP's procurement and supply chain solutions help reduce costs, improve performance, and boost EBITDA. GEP helps great companies stay on track and primed for the next phase of the business cycle. GEP, helping the world's best companies do better.
Why do hedge funds and...
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunnin to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic game replays to start listening.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying to
standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your 7th inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting 9 podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin. I'm Matt Miller.
And here in London, I'm Caroline Hepke. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
So we're looking at European equity indexes and really global equity indexes that are down across the board. This after the Communist Party in Beijing said they really want to enforce national security laws, reducing some of Hong Kong's independence, and that brought the Hang Seng Index down 5.5%, the biggest drop we've seen in the Hong Kong benchmark index since June or July of 2015. So it's been basically 5 years since we've seen it drop this far, this fast. As a result, European equity indexes are down more than 1%, pretty much across the board. The IBEX and the FTSE MIB in Madrid and Milan, respectively, are down less than 0.5%. But we're looking at a 100-point drop on the DAX, a 90-point drop on the FTSE, and the CAC 40 is down 44 points. So pretty red to end the week. In terms of U.S. equity index futures today, you're also seeing red arrows there, down about 2/3 to 3/4%. It looks like the tech stocks right now are going to take the biggest hit as the NASDAQ futures are down 0.8%. But in terms of other risk assets, we don't see such pronounced moves except for in oil. Caroline was mentioning earlier the big drops we see in crude. NYMEX WTI down more than 6% right now to 31.83, and ICE Brent crude down 5% to 34.18.
Yeah, worries about China's recovery seem to be part of that mix, don't they? Let's also talk a bit this morning about a new study assessing and comparing 21 leading global business districts. Apparently, this report has confirmed that Western business districts do continue to lead the way. So obviously, London and New York took first and second place, despite some fierce competition from Asian counterparts. Joining us this morning is Lisette Van Doorn, who is the CEO of ULI Europe, which did this research, this 2020 attractiveness of global business districts report. Quite strange, obviously, given that so many are closed at the moment. But you make that very point. EY and Urban Land Institute, you talk about these cities needing to adapt to respond to the COVID-19 crisis. How, Lisette? How?
Well, that's a very good question. They will need to focus much more on the human being by becoming more attractive places to stay, not only to work, which has been the case traditionally, but much more residential, much more green spaces, much more sustainable transport. And in the past, that's been focused mostly on public transport, and we all know that that's the favorite place to go right now. So there will be also needed a much bigger focus on sidewalks where people can walk, or bike infrastructure. So the districts really need to be transformed to accommodate the human being. And that's not only within the district, it's also within the buildings, where air quality needs to be looked at.
Well, I mean, it's not just that. I mean, I think of my time working in New York, and it's much more prevalent there than, say, in London, but you have to get on an people in order to the 10th, 20th, 50th floor. So that's no longer an option. Does that reduce the importance of,
experience right now may not be fully the future. During this, we've also learned very rapidly to efficiently work from home. And the signs from that are very positive. So in the future, you could think of a very different role of offices. Not the you go to that's closer to people's homes, so they don't have to get on public transport, and then go to the office to meet colleagues. It doesn't have to be all day. So you can think about spreading flows of people much more throughout the day. But it will require a lot of thinking how we get this right for the long term.
Yeah, and I'm thinking A, time, B, money, and a lot of commitment to this. So it's got to be more than, this particular threat, one could argue. Having said that, of course, actually people have been leaving London for the last, I think, 2 to 3 years, as that commute time, gets longer and harder and property prices are so high.
Yes, that's right. It requires a commitment. I must say, in the industry, over the past couple of years, we've already seen an increasing focus on A, sustainability, environmental issues, and B, social value. So it starts to come through, although slowly, and a lot still needs to happen, that it's not only about financial returns, but ultimately what's good for the people is good for the owners and the operators of these business districts as well, because it will preserve value over the longer term.
Do you foresee working from home really grow, or is this just a blip? Is this going to be a long-term change from the coronavirus crisis because it's how important having business districts really is? Or do you think that we're going to see a new way to work going forward?
We get that question almost every day, and the views range from no change to no offices needed anymore. We think the truth will lie somewhere in the middle, where, yes, we've now got to learn to work from home efficiently. We've got the technology to work, including video conferencing, where I think before the crisis there was always a lot of hesitation that it wasn't perfect, it didn't work well. We've overcome that. But what we've also learned in this crisis is that human interaction is key. We also need to be together, especially for creative processes, innovation. You can perfectly do your tasks and the general work, the plain vanilla, the tasks you need to do from home. But really the innovation, the business development, and all of that requires human interaction. So we think there will be a mix.
Yeah, be interesting to see what these cities look like in the future. The city, and then the fifth, is Canary Wharf, because they break it up into different areas.
Well, that's not really fair. So what's the sixth?
The sixth is New York's financial district, and the second is New York's Midtown. So also New York split in two.
All right, well, London and New York, big winners as always. Thanks very much for that, Lizette. Let's get out to Sandra Kilhoff now with your global news headlines.
Good morning, Matt. Now, people coming to the UK could be fined £1,000 if they don't self-isolate for 2 weeks when they arrive. Under the plans, health officials will carry out spot checks at private addresses to ensure travellers are complying with the government's quarantine. That said, road hauliers and medical officials would be exempt, as well as those arriving from the Republic of Ireland. The new rules are not expected to come into force until next month. To Italy, where new coronavirus cases are continuing to decline. Fell to 642 cases on Wednesday.
The number of daily fatalities was substantially unchanged at 161. The government is now monitoring the pandemic trends at regional level and may further relax containment measures with free movement within the country from June the 3rd. In Rome, Flavia Rotondi, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Russia has warned that the U.S. withdrawal Open skies will impact all members of the pact. President Donald Trump says Russian violations make it untenable for the U.S. to stay